Right, the United Nations Secretary General António Guterres is expected to address the World Economic Forum any time now. But in the meantime, I do have with me in studio Sophie Mukwena. She's the SABC News International Editor. Thank you so much for joining us, Sophie. So what can we expect the Secretary General of the UN to say? We know that there's so many challenges in the world and he's very pro-multilateralism, as is our president. What do you expect?
Well, I think he is going to touch on main issues that he has been focusing on, the issue of climate change. And this comes at a time where we saw the President of the United States of America signing the executive orders saying that America is going to pull out of the Paris Agreement. He is also going to touch on multilateralism and also the respect for rule of law, international law, and also what is very critical, how you transform the financial system.
Now, of course, it looks like he's being introduced, but we'll continue talking until he gets up on that podium. One of the issues, of course, that is very much top of mind is what's been happening in Gaza. And we know that he's been a real champion for getting more aid into Gaza, and that seems to be materializing thus far.
You are correct. You have powerful nations there. We saw the report last night from the World Economic Forum that 50 heads of state and government are going to participate and attend. And I think António Guterres is going to use this opportunity to call on the developed nations in particular to ensure that they continue to support the people of Gaza. I think he is going to also touch on a need for a respect for multilateralism as he's making his way to the podium.
Okay, Sophie, we're going to jump in there and let him speak.
It's good to be back in Davos. Your focus this year is on collaboration for the intelligent age, and it is a noble vision. But let's face it, when many people look around the world, they don't see much collaboration, and perhaps, to their minds, not enough intelligence. Despite progress on many fronts, investment in renewables, technological leaps, health advances, many of our world's problems are getting worse. We are living in an increasingly rudderless world. Last week, I delivered my annual priority speech to the General Assembly, and I said that our world is facing a Pandora's box of troubles. We face widening geopolitical divisions, rising inequalities, and assault on human rights. And we see a multiplication of conflicts, some of which are leading to the reshaping of different parts of the world, not least the Middle East. And there is finally a measure of hope when a ceasefire and hostage release deal in Gaza takes place, and we are working to surge up desperately needed humanitarian aid. I was also just in Lebanon, where a cessation of hostilities is holding and a new government is taking shape after 2 years of stalemate. From the Middle East to the Ukraine to Sudan and beyond, we still face an uphill battle. But we will never give up in calling for peace, but peace grounded on values. The UN Charter, international law, including international humanitarian law, and the principles of sovereignty, political independence, and territorial integrity of states. Meanwhile, developing countries are in economic dire straits. Some are facing double-digit inflation rates, while interest payments in Africa are earning up 27% of all government revenues. On every front, our system of governance are often ill-equipped to deal with these challenges. Many were built for a different era, a different economy, and a different world. We are working to reform institutions for the 21st century, from the global financial architecture to the UN Security Council, two basic aspects of our summit of the future. But reforming institutions requires a reform in mindsets. because we face big challenges, existential challenges, and I'm not convinced leaders get it. Yes, we all understand the nature of an existential threat. Those of us who lived through the Cold War remember the decades spent living under the constant shadow of nuclear annihilation. Of course, the nuclear threat is still with us. But when it comes to existential threats, nuclear is no longer alone. Today we face two new and profound threats that demand far more global attention and action because they threaten to upend life as we know it: the climate crisis and the ungoverned expansion of artificial intelligence. First, climate chaos. I recently saw an analysis that exposed the grim irony. 13 of the world's biggest ports for oil supertankers will be overwhelmed by rising sea levels. Rising seas, which are caused by rising temperatures, and rising temperatures, which are overwhelmingly caused by burning fossil fuels. Our fossil fuel addiction is a Frankenstein monster, sparing nothing and no one. All around us, we see clear signs that the monster has become master. We just endured the hottest year and the hottest decade in history. 2024 is likely to be the first calendar year that's pushed back past 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Now, breaching this limit does not mean the long-term goal of keeping the rise in global temperature to 1.5 degrees is shot. It means we need to fight even harder to get on track, especially when we are seeing today sea level rise, heat waves, floods, storms, droughts and wildfires, and that are just a preview of the horror movie to come. A world where every economy feels the pain of supply chains severed, of infrastructure destroyed, of higher prices and higher insurance premiums, or no insurance at all. At the same time, another far more hopeful story is unfolding. Cheap, plentiful energy provided by renewables is an extraordinary economic opportunity, one that will benefit people in every country, and then that will make the end of the fossil fuel age inevitable, no matter how hard vested interests try to stop it. A number of financial institutions and industries are backtracking on climate commitments. And here at Davos, I want to say loudly and clearly that this is short-sighted. And paradoxically, it is selfish, but also self-defeating. You are on the wrong side of history. You are on the wrong side of science. And you are on the wrong side of consumers who are looking for more sustainability, not less. This warning certainly also applies to the fossil fuel industry and advertising, lobbying and PR companies who are aiding, abetting and greenwashing. Global heating is racing forward and we cannot afford to move backward. And government must keep their promise to produce new economy-wide national climate action plans this year, well ahead of COP30 in Brazil. And those plans must align with limiting the rise in global temperatures to 1.5 degrees, including by accelerating global energy transition. We also need a surge in finance for climate in developing countries to adapt to global heating, to slash emissions and seize the benefits of the renewables revolution. We need to tackle high capital costs that are leaving developing countries behind. And I also urge all businesses and financial institutions to create robust, accountable transition plans this year. These too must align with 1.5 degrees and with the full recommendations of the United Nations High-Level Expert Group on Net Zero. To the corporate leaders who remain committed to climate action, your leadership is needed now more than ever. Do not back down. Stay on the right side of history. Now is the time to shift our collective efforts into overdrive and make 2025 the biggest year yet for climate action. The second area of existential concern is ungoverned artificial intelligence. Yes, AI holds untold promise for humanity, revolutionizing learning, advancing healthcare, and diagnosing illness earlier, supporting farmers with smarter tools to boost productivity, clearing landmines and better targeting aid in times of crisis. These are real results happening right now. But with this promise comes profound risk, especially if AI is left ungoverned. AI can be used as a tool of deception. It can disrupt economies and labor markets, undermine trust in institutions, and have chilling effects on the battlefield. And AI could deepen inequalities by excluding those without the resources or tools to benefit from its promise. Once again, collaboration is critical. The Global Digital Compact, adopted in September at the United Nations, offers a roadmap to harness the immense potential of digital technology and close digital divides. It also brings the world together around a shared vision for artificial intelligence, one where this technology serves humanity, not the other way around. The concept establishes the first universal agreement on the governance of AI that brings every country to the table. It includes the creation of an independent international scientific panel on AI, pooling expertise to bridge knowledge gaps and help every nation make the most informed AI policy decisions. The Compact also calls for a periodic global dialogue on AI governance as an inclusive space for stakeholders to come together under the auspices of the United Nations. And it also foresees a network of capacity-building initiatives for developing countries, which have the most at stake as AI-driven systems grow and expand. And we must collaborate so that all countries and people benefit from AI's promise and potential to support development and social and economic progress for all. By investing in affordable internet, digital literacy, and the infrastructure that allows every country to harness AI's potential. By helping developing countries use AI to grow small businesses, improve public services, and connect communities to new markets. And by placing human rights always at the center of AI-driven systems. The United Nations is committed to leading these efforts. And we are working with governments, industry, and civil society to ensure that AI becomes a tool of opportunity, inclusion, and progress for all people. Ladies and gentlemen, now is the time to wake up to these existential challenges and face them head-on and transform them in sources of progress and welfare for everybody. As a global community, we must live up to this great responsibility, and let's do so by working as one, in collaboration, as the motto of the World Economic Forum. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion today.
So, Mr. Secretary General, great to have you back. One can look at the world as like a glass half empty or a glass half full. So let's start with the latter and we come back to the first. You just came back from Lebanon. It is now a president elected. There is a ceasefire, as you mentioned, in Gaza, start of releasing hostages. There is a new government in Damascus. We know your special envoy is there today, working on that. Currently, there hasn't been an escalation leading to a war between Israel and Iran that would have a huge impact. So where do you see the Middle East in a year when you come back to Davos?
Well, I know it will be deeply reshaped, but I do not know exactly in what direction all the different aspects will be reshaped. First, Gaza. I think it's important, first of all, to recognize that the ceasefire in Gaza is the product of the work of many, and I would praise the United States, Qatar and Turkey for their efforts for months and months and months to obtain the release of hostages, that, by the way, should be immediate and unconditional, and also to obtain the ceasefire. But the negotiations were dragging. And then, all of a sudden, it happened. I think there was a large contribution of the robust diplomacy of the, at the time, President-elect of the United States. I feel that when we had the position of Israel still reluctant to the ceasefire just 2 days before it happened, and then all of a sudden there was an acceptance, I think that we have witnessed an example of robust diplomacy that is something that we must recognize.
Do you expect more robust diplomacy?
I think we will have more examples of robust diplomacy. Let's see now in what direction. But what is not yet clear is what is the future of the relationship between Israelis and Palestinians. One possibility is to move into annexation of the West Bank and probably a kind of a limbo situation in Gaza, which of course is against international law and would mean there will never be peace in the Middle East. The other possibility is to be still on time with a revitalized Palestinian Authority and an open approach by the Israeli government to still be able to look into a two-state solution. It's not yet clear how things will develop. In Lebanon, I believe that the ceasefire is holding, and my hope is that we will witness a Lebanon that will be able to finally have an effective government. And we know the Lebanese, if the war ends at noon, at 1 o'clock, they start rebuilding. So the Lebanese people have an enormous potential. So I'm optimistic about Lebanon. But we are still not yet we still do not yet have a guarantee that this ceasefire will hold and will lead to a final peace agreement. I think Syria is the big question mark. We have a new government that is saying all the right things, but at the same time it's a government that still corresponds only of what we had in Idlib, and in organizations that have a tradition that is not exactly of the members of the choir of a church. So there are many questions, and we see
that's
some
the UN Secretary General there in conversation at the World Economic Forum, speaking about a myriad of issues, really right now talking about the issue of peace and security as it pertains specifically to the Middle East. I have Sophie Mukwena in studio with me. She's our international news editor, just to unpack some of the issues that he outlined in his speech at the podium. Thanks very much, Sophie, for joining us. So it's so funny listening to the Secretary General. It's almost as if he shared his notes with President Cyril Ramaphosa, because he covers pretty much all the same points, you know, around the issue of peace and security, the issue of debt, particularly in the global south, you know, reforming the global financial architecture, speaking to all those same points, and of course, critically, climate change, which is going to affect all of us, but that push that there needs to be responsibility on the part of those who have actually caused climate change to do their part to help developing and low-income economies to deal with climate mitigation.
Yes, it's like he gave us the speech, because in our preview with you earlier on, just before he took to the podium, these are the issues that we spoke about that he's likely to touch on, because you follow a newsmaker, you learn to understand what this newsmaker is all about, and therefore you can be able to speculate the speech, but also you follow the trend. You'd recall that he came to South Africa in December, and he met President Cyril Ramaphosa because he wanted President Cyril Ramaphosa to take certain issues as part of the priority of hosting G20. And when I listened to the president, I could hear that here he is also including some of the issues that UN would like the G20 leaders to cover. And you'd recall we spoke to him after the meeting with the president, and he spoke about these issues with SABC during the exclusive interview with SABC. So there's consistency. So I think when the president was speaking, knowing that he is at a multilateral level or international stage where you have other leaders and interest parties, he brought in what the UN wants to see being part of the content of the G20. So for the coming months, we're going to almost repeat ourselves as we build to that big summit. So there was synergy between the president and the SG. And António Guterres has been a friend of South Africa even before he became the SG. So there has been that relationship with South Africa.